I was halfway through my grocery list when a white SUV slid across the painted blue lines like it owned the afternoon, nose first into the handicap spot. No placard, no tag, no apology. The door popped open and the driver stepped out with the kind of confidence that makes a whole parking lot pause. And maybe this was the part one was ashamed of later. I pulled out my phone and hit record, because I just had a feeling something was about to happen and nobody would believe me if I tried to tell it without proof. It was a Saturday at Maple Ridge Plaza, that time of day when every cart will squeaks and the smell of pretzels and mulch mixes into a weird kind of small-town perfume. The handicap space was in full view of the coffee stand and the hardware store. A man in a wheelchair, later I learned his name was Mason, was waiting in the passenger drop-off lane, rain clouds piling up behind him like slow mountains. He gave the SUV a long, even look, not mean, not pleading, just tired. The driver glanced his way and bounced her sunglasses higher on her head like a crown. "Back in a minute," she said to nobody, hoisting a designer tote. It came out bright, cheerful, practiced. I don't know how to explain it except to say the words were polite while the meaning was not. Her name, I'd learned 2 scenes later when the officer asked for identification, was Darla Prescott. Mid-30s, sleek hair twisted into a strategic knot, heels she could run a board meeting in. I remember thinking she looked like an ad for getting what you want. She clicked across the crosswalk and disappeared into the bakery with its fogged-up display case and cinnamon breath. A couple near me made the sound people make when they're not sure whether to get involved. I looked at Mason. He looked at the blue paint under my shoes. Something in my chest did a slow turn. "Hey," I said, ratcheting my voice up just enough to float it after her. "Nothing." The bakery door swung shut and held. You need to understand what that spot means. My uncle lost the use of his legs in a ladder fall, and I've watched him calculate a parking lot like a chessboard. Ramps, lips, cracks, that one car that's too close to the line so he can't get his chair angled right. When you live with that map in your head, the blue symbol isn't paint anymore. It's an agreement the whole community signs, daily, without reading. That morning it felt like someone had taken a pen and crossed out their name with a smiley face. I walked over to Mason and introduced myself. He said, "Happens all the time," and I could tell he was trying to keep his tone easy so the day wouldn't bruise. The wind picked up. People angled their phones at the SUV like it was a bird you might never see again. A patrol car glided in on the kind of hush only new brakes have. Out stepped Officer Ruiz, mid-40s, posture like a yardstick, the face of a man who's answered every version of "Isn't there something more important?" He took in the lack of placard, the bright blue paint, the wheelchair, symbol big enough to land a helicopter on. He said hello to Mason like this was not step one, but step always. Then he wrote the ticket. Slow, deliberate. The pen moved like it could hear the bakery door. The crowd, and yes, by then it was a crowd, held its breath. When Darla came back, she came back with a pink box balanced on a latte cup and a look that said she'd planned the rest of our afternoon for us. She saw the patrol car, then the ticket, and it hit her features in order: surprise, offense, indignation, righteousness, the storm front moving across a map. "Excuse me," she sang, still smiling as she shifted the box to the crook of her arm. "What's happening here?" Officer Ruiz, who had the calm of a man hand-picking his words from a shelf, said, "Ma'am, this is a reserved space. You're parked without a placard." "I was 5 minutes," she said. 7, tops. "You were 18, he said, glancing at his watch and back. "We log arrivals." "I didn't see the sign," she said, lifting her sunglasses up so the sign 2 feet from her face could shine light into the truth. "The sign is the size of a menu board," I heard myself say before the wiser part of me caught up. Her head snapped toward me. "Do we know each other?" "No, ma'am," I said, suddenly very fond of the word. "I doubt we'd get along." Darla turned back to Ruiz. "My mother's disabled. I was picking up cake for her." "I'm not a monster." It was the kind of line that sounds reasonable until you put it next to the facts, and then it shrinks. "You can pick up cake," Ruiz said. "You just can't pick up a space that isn't yours." "Is this a quota thing?" she asked, the smile now edged with metal. "Because my husband is on the chamber board. And this," she gestured broadly as if including the clouds, "is not the look you want. I want people to be able to get out of their cars," Ruiz said, turning to Mason. "Sir, were you waiting on this space?" Mason, who had been quiet this whole time, gave Darla the same, even look as before. "I was," he said, "but I've learned patience. It's the only hobby I can afford." The crowd made that low-o sound people make when someone says something so clean it cuts. Darla flushed and tipped her chin. "I can move the car." "You can," Ruiz said, "right after we finish this, and after the tow operator secures it." That's when the tow truck rounded the corner. All hydraulic size and orange lights like a small parade had shown up for the truth. The unexpected part wasn't that a tow was happening. I'd seen that before. It was how quickly the decision landed, how sure it was, how the air in the lot shifted from a dozen private opinions to one shared rule settling itself like dust. Darla stepped in front of the SUV as if her body were a better argument than the law. "You can't take my car. Please step aside," the tow operator said, not unkindly. He had the long patience of someone who'd been called every name already today and survived it. "My husband is on his way," she announced to all of us, as if we were extras hired to nod. "Perfect," a guy near the coffee stand said. "We'll start the encore when he gets here." Phones went up higher. Mine kept recording. I caught my reflection in the SUV's tint and felt that little flare of self-disgust. Does the lens make courage feel cheap and judgment feel free? But then I looked at Mason's hands on his wheels, the way he had to calculate space while other people played pretend with rules, and the disgust cooled into something steadier. Evan Prescott arrived in a silk tie and the stride of a man used to doors opening early. He kissed his wife on the temple in a way that might have been sweet in a different movie. "Officer," he said, "we can sort this out." "We are," Ruiz said. "She's receiving a citation and the car is being towed." Evan's smile was the kind that shows 3 teeth and not an ounce of humility. "Do you know who we are?" "People who parked where others need to," Ruiz answered. "That's all I need to know." Evan tried every angle: emergency, misunderstanding, donation, even the classic, "We support law enforcement in this town," which is like telling a lifeguard you own the pool. Ruiz didn't move. He explained that the law doesn't bend for sincerity, and it certainly doesn't bend for status. He spoke directly, cleanly, not to humiliate, but to draw a line you can see from space. Darla, now holding the empty pink box like a shield, turned on the crowd. "Is this entertainment for you?" "No," Mason said. "It's logistics. I've been circling for 20 minutes. The tow truck's lift tilted, metal murmuring across metal. It was a small, perfect sound. People didn't cheer, not exactly. What they did was exhale. The SUV rose. Darla's face did something complicated, and human anger melting into embarrassment, melting into a kind of stunned quiet. I felt almost bad, then remembered that feeling bad is not a parking pass. That night, the clips went everywhere. Someone added captions. Someone else found an angle where you could see the reflection of Darla fixing her hair as she blocked the tow, and that became a meme. I posted my video with the caption, "Blue paint is a promise," and it got picked up by a local news station that called the next morning. A disability advocacy group issued a statement that wasn't gleeful, wasn't cruel, just crisp and grateful and focused on access. It said what I couldn't find the right words for at the time. Accessibility isn't a courtesy extended to a few. It's the ground level of community. Then came the backlash. Because the internet is a centrifuge, it spins everything until only the extremes remain. Darla posted a selfie in her kitchen with a paragraph about anxiety and public shaming and context you don't know. Some people sympathized. Some called it spin. Parody accounts with the SUV's license plate number, blurred, thank God, started narrating their days like, "Just parked on a cloud. Angels are so dramatic." The whole thing got bigger than the lot, bigger than the cake, bigger than the people inside it. When the court date landed 2 weeks later, it felt like the final episode of a show we'd all been hate-watching. The municipal courtroom smelled like dry books and lemon cleaner. Mason was there in a good denim jacket, hair combed sharp. Officer Ruiz was there with the easy posture of someone who didn't have to edit his story. I went because I wanted a better ending than comments. Darla wore black and looked smaller. Evan was there too, smoothing his tie into a solution. The judge watched the clips, and the room glowed blue from the projector like we were underwater. "Mrs. Prescott," the judge said after the video, "were you parked in a space reserved for disabled access without a placard?" There was a pause where 100 excuses lined up and decided to save themselves the trouble. "Yes," she said. "I was." "Anything else?" the judge asked. His commentary. It wasn't cruel. It was clean. He read out the fine, the tow and impound fees, the court costs. A number that sounded almost surgical. He talked about why the law exists, not to punish inconvenience, but to prevent it from becoming someone else's immobility, someone else's pain. He said the quiet thing out loud. We are judged not by how we treat emergencies, but how we treat ordinary obligations. Evan started to speak, and the judge held up a hand not to silence him, but to invite him to listen. That move, small as it was, felt like the day's moral laid out in a single gesture. Outside, the sky had done that late afternoon softening that makes every car look like it belongs in a catalog. Mason rolled forward and thanked Officer Ruiz. Ruiz said, "I just did what the badge asks." Darla and Evan passed us with their eyes low. No one jeered. No one heckled. It wasn't triumphant. It was simply done. And here's the part one didn't expect. A week after the court date, I saw the Prescotts at the same plaza. They parked at the far end. Darla carried a grocery bag and kept glancing at the blue space like it was a mirror she wasn't ready to face yet. Mason was there too, loading paint rollers into his trunk. Our town is small. Stories loop. People learn and unlearn at the speed of habit. I'll never know if they changed because of the fine or the optics or some private conversation at their kitchen island. I'll never know if it stuck. But I watched Darla hold the door for a woman with a stroller and then step all the way back to give her room. It took 3 extra seconds. It looked like the smallest thing a person could do. It looked like a beginning. Since that day, every time I pass a blue space, I think of my uncle and Mason and every ramp that's almost but not quite level with the curb. I think about how rules aren't cages. They're bridges we agree to build so the river between us doesn't get the last word. I think about phones pointed like arrows and whether that makes us better neighbors or just better narrators. I think about Officer Ruiz's patience and the judge's clean sentences and the sound of a tow truck lift when a community decides to honor its promises. Maybe you're listening and you see your town in this, or you see a totally different fight about power, about who gets to bend the world to fit their day. Maybe you've had your own moment in a parking lot where your heart said, "Speak," and your mouth stayed quiet, or the other way around. I'm not here to pretend I was a hero. I filmed. I spoke once. I posted a caption. It's not nothing, but it's not everything. The work is what we do when the camera isn't on, when the rain is starting and someone needs the space we were never promised but always owed them. Anyway, that's how a box of pastries and a cup of coffee turned into a story the whole town tells now. The one where entitlement met a rule that didn't flinch, where a tow truck became a drum roll, where a judge put things back in their sensible places with a sentence you could write on your hand. If you were there, maybe you'd tell it different. Stories are maps. They leave out the wild parts so we can find our way home. So let me end it the only honest way I know. What do you think justice looks like here? Was the tow enough? Was the fine too much? Did the crowd cross a line by turning a mistake into a spectacle? Or was the spectacle the only thing that made the rule real? Tell me where you land on it.